Once upon a time, in a prosperous kingdom, there lived a wise and benevolent king named Aryan. Despite his wealth and power, King Aryan often felt restless and unfulfilled. One day, he heard about a mystical sage who lived atop a mountain, known for unraveling life's deepest mysteries. Desperate for peace, the king decided to visit the sage. After days of travel, King Aryan reached the sage's humble abode. Bowing before him, the king said, "O wise one, I am burdened by a sense of bondage. I have everything: wealth, power, respect, but I feel trapped. Please guide me to freedom." The sage smiled and led the king to a beautiful golden cage. Inside the cage was a bird, singing melodiously. "Your Majesty," said the sage, "what do you see?" The king replied, "I see a bird trapped in a cage. Though it sings, it cannot fly." The sage asked, "Do you believe the bird knows it is trapped?" The king observed the bird for a moment and said, "Perhaps not. It seems content, unaware of its captivity." The sage nodded. "Indeed. Now let us see what happens if we open the cage." The sage unlocked the golden cage, but the bird did not fly away. It continued to sing, sitting on its perch. The king was puzzled. "Why doesn't it fly? It's free to leave." The sage replied, "The bird does not know it is free. Its entire world has been the cage. It does not even see the open door." The king suddenly realized the lesson. The sage continued, "Your Majesty, like the bird, you are trapped not by real chains but by the illusions of the mind. The idea of bondage and the desire for freedom both come from the same place, the mind. The door to your freedom has always been open, but you have not noticed because you keep searching for freedom elsewhere." The king asked, "What must I do to escape this illusion?" The sage smiled. "Do not try to escape. Instead, awaken. Observe the cage for what it is, a creation of your mind. See the open door and step out, not by effort, but by realization. True freedom lies in understanding that there was never any cage." The king bowed deeply, thanking the sage. When he returned to his palace, King Aryan began to live with awareness, observing his thoughts, desires, and fears without being trapped by them. Over time, he discovered the peace he had always sought, not in the palace, not in the mountains, but within himself. And so, the king ruled wisely and happily, free from the illusions that once bound him. The question is simple but profound. How do I free myself from this mind, this skull? You approach seeking refuge, yearning to escape. Yet consider this paradox. This very thought of freedom arises from the same mind you're trying to escape. As long as there is a desire to be free, it is the mind's desire. And that's the trap. The mind doesn't just create the world, it creates salvation too. Here's the irony. When we realize the mind has created the world, we think that escaping the mind will bring freedom. But that very effort is another game of the mind. It's like trying to outwit yourself, only to fall into a new trap. You create another world. Salvation becomes another kind of prison. What is this world anyway? It's anything that entangles you, that fuels expectation and desire. It could be lust, ambition, or even hope for liberation. The world isn't just out there, it's within. Sit in a shop, you're in the world. Sit in a temple, you're still in the world if your mind clings to salvation. Freedom isn't about escaping places or situations. If it were that easy, everyone would be free. Freedom lies not in expectation or aspiration. Even the dream of salvation is still a dream, part of the same world you want to leave behind. True freedom exists only here and now. To achieve this, you must abandon even the desire for freedom. Otherwise, in your quest for liberation, you'll keep creating new prisons for yourself. Think about it. If no one tied you up, how can you be bound? And if you're not bound, what are you trying to free yourself from? The very effort to break free might create the illusion of bondage. Instead of striving to be free, ask yourself, where is the bondage? Look closely. The desire to escape is just another trick of the mind. Now let me ask you this. Have you ever asked yourself, what is freedom? Is it a destination we can reach, or is it something deeper, something closer than we think? Many of us spend our lives searching for freedom. Freedom from struggles, freedom from responsibilities, or even freedom from our own minds. But is it possible that the very thought of freedom itself is keeping us bound? Acharya Chanakya, the master strategist and philosopher, often emphasized that wisdom begins with self-reflection. He said, a person who cannot control their own mind will find it difficult to control anything else. So let us reflect. If the desire to be free is born from the mind, is it truly freedom, or is it just another game the mind plays? Chapter 1. The thought of freedom is still the mind's thought. Chanakya taught us to observe the nature of desires and aspirations. He believed that human ambitions, when unchecked, could become traps. The thought of being free, freed from your struggles or even your own mind, is still a thought generated by the mind. And as long as you are attached to that thought, you are not free. Ask yourself, who is it that wants to be free? It is the mind. And the mind cannot escape itself. Chanakya said, man's greatest enemy is not external but internal, his uncontrolled thoughts and desires. The moment you understand that the desire for freedom itself is part of the illusion, you begin to see the deeper truth. Chapter 2. Freedom cannot be achieved through effort alone. Consider this. Have you ever tried so hard to achieve something that you ended up feeling more trapped than before? Chanakya observed that blind effort, without wisdom, often leads to failure. He said, before you start any work, always ask yourself 3 questions. Why am I doing this? What might be the result? Will I be successful? The same applies to freedom. The harder you push to break free, the more entangled you become. Why? Because your effort is fueled by the same mind you're trying to escape. True freedom does not come through force, it comes through understanding. Chapter 3. The mind creates both the world and salvation. Chanakya was a realist who understood the power of the mind in shaping reality. He said, as a drop of water shapes a stone, so too do thoughts shape a man's destiny. The mind creates your world, the ambitions, the fears, the successes, and the failures. But it also creates your idea of salvation, of liberation. The same mind that says, I need wealth to be happy, might later say, I need to renounce wealth to find peace. Both are illusions. Recognizing this is the first step toward wisdom. Chapter 4. Expectations are a form of bondage. Why do we feel trapped? Often, it is because of our expectations. Expectations of how life should be, how others should behave, or how the world should treat us. Chanakya warned against this mindset, saying, do not be overly attached to your plans, for they rarely go as you wish. When we expect freedom, salvation, or happiness to look a certain way, we bind ourselves to those expectations. True freedom lies not in fulfilling expectations, but in letting them go. Chapter 5. Freedom exists in the present moment. Chanakya emphasized the importance of living in the present. He said, the past is a dream, the future is a mystery, and this moment is a gift. That is why it is called the present. Many of us think freedom will come someday when we achieve something or overcome some challenge. But freedom is not a distant goal. It is here, now. The key is to stop looking ahead and start experiencing the present fully. Chapter 6. Desiring freedom is another trap. Here's a paradox. Even the desire to be free can trap you. Acharya Chanakya understood this human tendency to replace one attachment with another. He said, desires are endless. To satisfy one is to ignite another. The desire for freedom can become just as binding as the desire for wealth or power. It is only when you let go of the desire itself that you can experience true liberation. Chapter 7. Bondage is an illusion. Finally, Chanakya taught that much of what we perceive as problems or limitations are self-created. He said, The greatest mistake is to let fear and doubt govern your decisions. What if the bondage you feel, the struggle, the constraints, is nothing more than an illusion? If no one has tied you up, why are you trying to escape? The very effort to free yourself assumes there is something binding you, but often, that bondage exists only in your mind. Through these reflections, we see how the mind deceives us and how wisdom, as taught by Chanakya, can help us navigate these deceptions. Let us continue this journey of self-discovery, questioning and observing the games of the mind. Acharya Chanakya, with his unmatched wisdom, often emphasized that understanding is the key to solving any problem. When it comes to the concept of bondage, his teachings guide us toward clarity. True freedom does not come from escape or rebellion. It comes from realizing the nature of what binds us and recognizing it for what it truly is. Chapter 8. Question your bondage. To understand bondage, one must first question it. Acharya Chanakya said, "Knowledge is your greatest weapon. Ignorance is your greatest enemy." If you feel bound, the first step is not to struggle but to investigate. What exactly is binding you? Is it external circumstances or internal fears? Bondage often exists in the assumptions we never question. It's not the chains themselves, but our belief in their power over us that holds us captive. When you start to question your bondage with an open mind, you'll realize it is often weaker than you imagined. Chapter 9. The opposite of desire is still desire. Chanakya understood human nature deeply. He warned that simply replacing one desire with another does not lead to liberation. He said, "Craving for pleasure and running from pain are two sides of the same coin." When we desire freedom, we are still caught in the cycle of craving. It might seem like a noble goal, but it is still a desire, and desires always carry the risk of disappointment. To transcend this cycle, we must rise above all cravings, not just the obvious ones, but even the subtle ones that masquerade as virtuous aspirations. Chapter 10. Illusions are self-created. Chanakya's teachings often emphasize the power of the mind in shaping reality. He said, "Man is not punished for his deeds, but by his thoughts." The mind has the unique ability to create illusions so vivid that they feel real. This is why people can become trapped in their own mental constructs, mistaking them for reality. Like the young monk who convinced himself he was a buffalo, we too fall victim to the illusions our minds create. But these illusions have no power of their own. They derive their strength from our belief in them. Chapter 11. Self-suggestion strengthens illusions. Chanakya once said, "Repetition of wrong actions or thoughts strengthens their grip on you." The more you focus on an idea, the more real it becomes to you, even if it has no basis in reality. This is why mantras and self-suggestions can be powerful tools, but they can also lead to delusion if used without awareness. The young monk, by repeating the thought that he was a buffalo, strengthened this illusion until it felt real. This teaches us that the mind is incredibly powerful, but its power must be directed wisely. If we allow our thoughts to run unchecked, they can create traps as strong as any physical chains. Chapter 12. The mind grows stronger when the body weakens. Chanakya's observations about human nature align with this truth. When the body becomes weak, the mind's influence grows stronger. He said, "Strength comes not just from the body, but from the balance between mind and body." During times of fasting, illness, or sleep deprivation, the mind's capacity to dream and imagine increases. This is why many spiritual practices include fasting or prolonged meditation. These practices heighten mental sensitivity. However, without wisdom, this heightened state can lead to greater illusions instead of liberation. For example, when the body is weakened, people are more prone to fantasies, hallucinations, or vivid dreams. Chanakya would advise caution here, as the weakened body can sometimes empower the mind to create stronger illusions rather than helping it see through them. Chapter 13. Dreams are necessary for the mind. Dreams, according to Chanakya's wisdom, serve as an outlet for the mind. He might say, "The mind, like a pot, must have an outlet for its contents. Otherwise, it overflows. When dreams are suppressed, the mind starts to store and intensify its desires, fears, and thoughts. This is why people often experience vivid dreams after periods of intense focus or deprivation. Dreams are the mind's way of releasing what it cannot express during waking hours. Recognizing this can help us avoid mistaking dreams, whether literal or metaphorical, for reality. Chanakya would remind us to see dreams for what they are: fleeting images of the mind, not truths about the world. Chapter 14. Spiritual practices can amplify illusions. Chanakya was deeply pragmatic and would caution against blindly following spiritual practices without understanding their purpose. He said, "A task performed without understanding is like a journey taken without a map. It leads nowhere." Mantras, fasting, and meditation can be powerful tools, but they are not inherently liberating. Used without awareness, they can strengthen illusions instead of breaking them. For example, repeatedly chanting a mantra can focus the mind. But if the mantra reinforces an illusion, it only deepens the trap. This is why Chanakya always emphasized wisdom and self-awareness over blind ritual. True liberation comes not from the practice itself, but from the understanding that underlies it. By understanding these insights, we begin to see how the mind operates, how it creates illusions, and how we can use Chanakya's wisdom to transcend these traps. Each point reminds us of the power of awareness and the importance of questioning our perceptions. Let us now move forward with even greater clarity on this journey of self-discovery. Acharya Chanakya's wisdom has illuminated countless paths for those seeking clarity and liberation. As we approach the final insights, it is vital to see how they weave together into a complete understanding of freedom, not as something to chase, but as something to realize. Chapter 15. Illusions melt with awareness. Chanakya often emphasized the transformative power of awareness. He said, "An intelligent person solves a problem by understanding it. A fool magnifies it through ignorance." This truth applies to our inner bondage as well. Bondage cannot survive the light of awareness because it is not real. It is simply a product of unconsciousness. When we look at our supposed chains with open eyes, their grip weakens. Just as darkness cannot exist in the presence of light, illusion cannot endure in the presence of awareness. This is why meditation, or deep self-inquiry, is such a powerful tool. It is not about controlling the mind, but about seeing it clearly. Chapter 16. Freedom is realized, not achieved. Chanakya believed in practical wisdom. He taught that true freedom is not something to be achieved, but something to be realized. He said, "True wealth lies in contentment, not in possession." In the same way, freedom lies in understanding that we were never truly bound. The idea of striving for liberation often leads us further away from it. When we think we need to escape, we reinforce the illusion of bondage. But when we realize there is nothing to escape from, we awaken to a state of natural freedom. Chapter 17. Bondage is a mental construct. Chanakya understood the power of the mind to construct both realities and delusions. He said, "The wise man builds his future with his thoughts, while the fool is trapped by them." The so-called bondage we experience is nothing more than a thought, an idea that we have accepted as real. When we recognize that it is just a mental construct, it loses its hold on us. This recognition is not intellectual but experiential. It happens when we stop identifying with the mind's stories and see them as mere thoughts passing by. Chapter 18. Wakefulness dissolves illusions. Chanakya often stressed the importance of vigilance. He said, "A careless man loses his fortune as quickly as a careless soldier loses his life." Wakefulness, being fully present in the moment, is the key to dissolving illusions. When we are awake, we see things as they are, not as we imagine them to be. The illusions created by the mind cannot withstand the clarity of wakefulness. This is why the Buddhist teachings, which echo Chanakya's wisdom, often focus on the practice of mindfulness, being fully present and aware. Chapter 19. Illusions are created by the mind, not the world. Chanakya's teachings remind us that the world itself is not the problem. It is our perception of the world that binds us. He said, "Do not blame the river for being deep. Learn to swim instead." Similarly, the world is not inherently binding. It is the mind that projects meanings, desires, and fears onto the world, creating the illusion of bondage. To be free, we must shift our focus from trying to change the world to understanding the workings of our own minds. Chapter 20. Freedom lies in seeing clearly. Chanakya's wisdom encourages us to value knowledge and understanding above all else. He said, "An intelligent person seeks the truth, a fool avoids it." True freedom lies not in escaping the world or the mind, but in seeing them clearly for what they are. When we see the mind's games and the illusions it creates, we no longer feel compelled to play along. This clarity brings a profound sense of freedom, not as an external state, but as an internal realization. Chapter 21. Liberation comes through realization, not effort. Chanakya often warned against misplaced effort. He said, "Effort without understanding is like running in the dark. You may move quickly, but you will go nowhere." Liberation does not come through effort, it comes through realization. The harder we strive to free ourselves, the tighter the illusion holds us. But when we stop, reflect, and truly see, we realize that we were never bound. This is the ultimate lesson. Freedom is our natural state, hidden only by the illusions we create. Chanakya's wisdom, rooted in profound understanding and practicality, teaches us that freedom is not a distant goal, but a realization waiting to happen. Each of the 21 insights we have explored today serves as a step toward this realization. From questioning the nature of bondage to understanding the power of illusions, from recognizing the role of the mind in creating our reality to awakening through awareness. Every step brings us closer to the truth. And the truth is simple. We are not bound. The chains we feel are illusions, created by the mind, strengthened by ignorance, and dissolved by awareness. Let us remember Chanakya's timeless words. The wise man finds strength in understanding. The fool searches for it elsewhere. May we find the strength to look within, to see clearly, and to awaken to the freedom that has always been ours. Thank you.